Our issue segment tonight, House Republican leaders withdrew legislation to repeal Obamacare last week after it became evident that the bill would not have enough votes to pass the House. Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, conceded we're going to be living with Obamacare for the foreseeable future. And liberals are now touting this as a loss for President Trump, but are they celebrating too soon? Take a look.
Obamacare is the law of the land. It's going to remain the law of the land until it's replaced. We did not have quite the votes to replace this law. Yeah, we're going to be living with Obamacare for the foreseeable future. I don't know how long it's going to take us to replace this law.
Today is a great day for our country. It's a victory. What happened on the floor is a victory for the American people, for our seniors, for people with disabilities, for our children, for our veterans.
Joining me now, author and former advisor to the Trump transition team, Brian Trascher. Brian, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, Brian, you heard Nancy Pelosi right there. She's celebrating this loss. She's not the only one. Many Democrats are celebrating this. Planned Parenthood was celebrating it on Twitter as well. Brian, in my opinion, this failed because the bill wasn't conservative enough. It didn't fail because people don't want to repeal Obamacare. It failed because it simply wouldn't repeal enough. That is Obamacare. In my opinion, the next round is going to be even more conservative. Am I wrong?
Well, look, the Democrats celebrating about this bill failing is a lot like the Lusitania making fun of the Titanic for hitting an iceberg. Okay, it's coming for them. All right, but the problem with the bill was not just. The basic problem with the bill is that the ACA and the AHCA, the only difference was the H, right? So it was a bad bill, and obviously they couldn't get a consensus. If Democrats were actually smart, what they would have done is helped Paul Ryan pass this bill, and then they would have had something very similar to Obamacare for the much more foreseeable future.
Right. I think we all at this point know what was wrong with the bill. Like you said, it just didn't repeal enough that is Obamacare. It just changed names. The subsidies became the tax credits. The exchanges stayed in place. The mandate was technically gone, but something like a 30% surcharge. Not exactly what we were promised on the campaign trail. But Brian, let me ask you, is President Trump going to give up and do tax reform first? Is he going to push this out, or are we going to see a new solution here shortly?
Well, I think the president's going to go after some low-hanging fruit, get some wins on the Hill, and then he'll come back and revisit it. But the thing is that the Democrats and Republicans had the chance to pass something kind of watered down, similar to Obamacare. Now they're going to have to get what the president chooses to push down their throat at a later date.
Right, and what do you see that looking like? I think he's going to have no choice but for it to be more conservative than this. He's going to have to just repeal Obamacare flatly, put out a very conservative proposal, and have that be the starting point of his negotiation. Some people are saying, given the fact that President Trump met with Democrats, that it's going to be even more moderate than this. I mean, what do you hear? What do you think it's going to look like?
Well, I think the first thing that the president and the leadership in Congress need to do is do a better job educating the American people of what kind of catastrophe is coming with Obamacare. They also need to highlight a lot of the fraud that went on in Obamacare. Look, it was a cash grab for the cronies of the last administration. You know, when United Healthcare decided to pull out of Obamacare, they contracted a marketing company called Go Health, based out of, wait for it, Chicago, Illinois, who started basically taking the information from the policyholders of United without their permission and switching people over to new insurance policies. And by the way, on top of that being, I think, illegal, they also cut all the insurance agents out of their commissions who had signed up these people right after Obamacare went into place. So there's a lot of stories out there where I think if the truth came out about what a boondoggle Obamacare was and what kind of a disaster it will be financially, I think that the president and Congress have an easier time selling a replacement.
Right, and I think you bring up an interesting point, because there's a faction of the Republican Party right now, and I don't know whether President Trump is part of this. He said he was part of this group before they actually pulled the bill, but there's a part of the Republican Party who wants to let Obamacare implode now, because this is basically the last year. Some people are arguing that Obamacare will even work as well as it's working, and we know it's not working very well. I don't know that I fall into that category. I'm more in the faction of repeal it right now before people have even higher premiums, before they lose their coverage completely, before the entire insurance market continues its death spiral and actually bites the dust here. Is there any chance we're actually going to see Obamacare implode?
Well, Liz, look, I think that the reason why the president and Congress went for a replacement first was because a repeal first, they would have been open to too much criticism about not giving it a chance, not at least coming to the table with Democrats and trying to improve the ACA as it is. Now that they've had the chance and it failed, I think that it's the environment's ripe for repeal. Say, okay, this is what you wanted. Okay, we're going to repeal it, or we could just wait for people to start getting those huge invoices in the mail and their premiums skyrocket, and healthcare keep getting rationed, and doctors pulling out, refusing to see patients. You know.
Right, and I guess that's why I don't like it, because I feel like it's a political game. They tried to come to the table with Democrats, but I don't want to sound too hyper partisan here. But we've seen the last 8 years the Democrats are not willing to come to the table with Republicans. Why would it be any different in this situation? Why would Republicans give Democrats the opportunity to continue their policy when we know their policy was Obamacare, and all Obamacare brought to us was higher premiums, higher deductibles, fewer choices, more monopolies, just disaster upon disaster. Small businesses had to stop providing coverage, or they had to fire their employees. They couldn't start up. Why are Republicans playing the game of politics when it is the American people, their livelihood, their wallets, their families, their health cares that are ultimately at stake here?
Well, I think you can remember back to the 90s during the Gingrich Revolution, what negotiation meant to a Democrat was do it my way. So I think we know that they're not really going to come to the table with any kind of really goodwill, right? So I think that the president let this plan go forward. He kind of gave everybody, you know, kind of enough rope. And now it's just a matter of him coming forward at a later date after everything cools down to push a repeal, or a repeal and a replace that actually makes sense. You know, this three-phase system that Congress came up with, I think it was a little hard for the American people to understand. They were wondering why some of the things like portability across state lines and getting rid of the mandate and not having continued taxes and whatnot, you know, taxes staying on for another 3 years, people didn't like that. That didn't sound like a real replace to them. They got to do a better job of coming up with a bill that the average American can understand. Right,
and in my opinion, this wasn't just an understanding problem. I would take it one step further and say, when you leave the second phase or the third phase in the hands of a federal agency, like they were arguing that they wanted to give Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price the power to change these rules after they had only enacted part of the legislation. I mean, that just gives the federal government agencies, unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats, that whole spiel, gives them too much power. If in 4 years or 8 years, when our president has a different initial beyond his name, not R, but D this time, they're going to change it back if it's not legislatively put into place. Brian, great discussion. We're out of time, but please come back soon.